Hello, Justin. What's up, man?
Hey, there you are. Welcome,
Yeah,
welcome to the chat that I started without you.
I was gonna say, well, I'm just moving between virtual theaters. Fortunately, it's not like one of those events in Las Vegas where
Yeah,
you have to go to different sides of the expo center.
yes, I do miss those though. Las Vegas CES trips was our team's kind of like yearly getaway that we could go see a bunch of new toys, hang out in Vegas for a week, and they've canceled it this year. So we haven't decided if we're just going to go back for the heck of tradition or if we're going to take a full year off of going to Vegas.
It is one of those like meccas for the tech world, right?
Yeah.
You know, the yearly trip to Vegas for CES, or for me, the last few times were for the AWS reInvent. Um, that's the software infrastructure geeky
Yeah.
part coming out. Well, Justin, thanks for joining us. Before we jump into uh, the company and what you all are working on, tell me this. We're all remote right now. We're all experiencing the challenges of trying to balance work and life, and everyone's experiencing changes. Like, what are some of the things that you've done either personally or professionally that have been big changes for you since COVID?
Yeah, I mean, I think like most people that are attending a conference like this today, life didn't change too much because we'd already been remote. We were used to this. We have an office in downtown Kissimmee, kind of outside of Disney World here, and we don't use it. Put it there. Had some stuff. Had some desks. We use it as like an occasional meetup spot. So COVID coming in like didn't change much for us professionally. We've always been meeting and working like this. Probably my newest thing though is that I am now a foster parent. So we have two
Wow.
boys, 11
No
and
way.
13. Yeah. So that has been, and I think at the very start of this conference, Joe asked what it was like being a new parent. And he had said it was like, way harder than he thought it would be, building a business. And yeah, I tend to agree. And I think I definitely gained a lot of respect from my parents and single parents who are working and parents who are juggling a startup and kids at the same time. So yeah, we jumped from like 0 kids though to a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old.
Wow.
Without the relationship building and the respect and all the things that you would gain from having kids of your own for 13 years, we just jumped right into the teenage years. So it has been quite an experience doing that in quarantine while building a startup and all other things.
Well, so I think that's an incredible story. And you mentioned teenage years. If I recall correctly, you've been an entrepreneur since your teenage years. I was just on another session. I asked this to another entrepreneur, but why did you choose this path? It's not an easy path.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how often that actually comes up with the kids is, yesterday talking about like, what do you want to do when you grow up and what do you want to be? And, one says, I have no idea. The other one says, well, I want to be a computer programmer like you, and, a lot of that discussion came out of like, well, how did you get started in this? Like, how do you even know you wanted to do this? And I was like, I didn't. I wanted to be an actor. I thought I was going to be on the Disney Channel when I was 13, 14 years old. I was planning on graduating from high school and going into acting school, and I wanted to be in movies and TV. And none of that obviously happened. But I, got a job when I was 16, and it was basically it's like the IT guy at a local startup. And yes, believe it or not, Florida does have local startups. That's a thing that happens. The industries might be a little bit different, and they may not be on Twitter, but we do have a startup culture here in Florida. But yeah, I got kind of like roped into this company. I was supposed to fix a bunch of like Windows XP computers or something like that. Didn't do any of that. Overheard a conversation about kind of like, hey, we need design work done. And I thought, hey, I have a pirated copy of Photoshop. I could pull that off. And just said, hey, I'll do your UI design for you. Not really even knowing what that meant. And kind of fell into a UI design role at that startup. Started learning development at that startup. I raised a seed round with the CEO of that company for another startup. And we actually IPO'd that company. And this was all before I was 19. So yeah, I mean, I've been doing it for a really long time, totally fell into it by accident, had basically zero background in, technology or, I was good with computers, but who isn't? That's my age and is a nerd, right? So
I love that. I mean, entrepreneurship can come from, I mean, it can come from anywhere, and it's just like interesting the paths that get us there.
yeah.
And so you're currently building a company called YAC. What is YAC?
Yeah, we like to think of YAC as a little bit more than just software. So it's really an extension of our team we've had for the last 5 years. We've been working remote as a design agency called So Friendly. So we've been remote. We know how to work remote. Like I just said, I worked since I was 16. I didn't go to an office. I was in high school. So I've got kind of a system down on what it's like to communicate with a team without being in an office every day, because I've never been in an office ever since I've been working. And so, yeah, we built YAC kind of as this kind of ethos of who we are and how we communicate. And it started as a way to just kind of like shout at your friend virtually, across the office, the virtual office. Actually, YAC stands for Yelling Across Cubicles. That was the original version of the product. But today it is an asynchronous voice messaging tool. So think of it like the voice messages that you see in iMessage or in WhatsApp, but very much dedicated to a B2B audience, kind of like Slack for voice, but very much integrates with Slack and all these other tools. We used it to completely eliminate meetings. So we don't do any Zoom calls internally anymore. We don't do Slack calls. Everything is done asynchronously. The biggest thing here is that we have a global team. And when I have one of my backend developers living in Bosnia right now, because he likes to travel the world, started out in Seattle, moved to Croatia, now he's in Bosnia. He just kind of hops around the world. You can't have daily stand-up calls where he has to crawl out of bed in the middle of the night to, do a call. And so we do everything asynchronously. In the morning, he sends his stand-up of what he's going to be working on. I can listen to that as a recorded message, and then I can reply as soon as I wake up. And he gets that as soon as he comes online. It really respects everybody's time. You can add your screen to it. So you can do an asynchronous screen recording. You can add a photo to it or a video, even a selfie video if you're using the mobile app. It's a really great way to kind of ask questions, get really detailed information across, give feedback on something, do a stand-up or a daily update, all with kind of the tone and emotion that voice gives you. And something that we discovered, especially over years of working remote, is that Slack is very like tone deaf. Everything's the same.
Yeah.
Your teammates become just kind of an avatar floating in your Slack. You don't think of them as like humans anymore. So when you give them feedback, it might sound way more harsh than it's supposed to be. And voice solves all of that.
There is something absolutely to be said for, the tone that is lost in written communication. So you make this point around, moving most communication or most meetings to asynchronous. It begs the question. I mean, everyone here wants to get away from more meetings. I don't think anyone looks at their calendar every day and says, "Oh my gosh, I'm so pumped that it's filled with Zoom or Google Meet calls." But it begs the question: is like, are there specific types of things that you see most companies doing regularly in scheduled meetings that should obviously be asynchronous? And then I would say also answer the counter question, like, what are some things that benefit from being in a synchronous format?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take the bold stance and say that I think most things can be asynchronous. I think that there is a weird pressure on people that it's not efficient to be asynchronous. And I don't think that that's true. Again, like I said, this product is as much a software product as it is kind of an extension of the way we think about work. And one of those things is a calm work environment. And the guys at Basecamp have kind of like heralded this idea of like, it can wait and a calm workplace. And a lot of that has to do with this idea that like not everything has to be done in real time. The great thing about asynchronous communication is it gives everyone a voice. So people who wouldn't commonly speak up in a real-time meeting because maybe they're a little bit more shy or they can't get a word in edgewise because someone like me is dominating the conversation most of the time. Asynchronous behavior allows someone to just, have their say, have a moment to think about what they're going to say because maybe they're not so quick on the draw like everybody else.
Right.
Be able to have that input and put it in. And then furthermore, of course, it supports multiple time zones. I think that as we, especially in a post-COVID world, as we look across hiring standards and what a company makeup is going to look like, you're going to have a global workforce and all these processes that you had in place that were dependent upon everyone being available at the same time in the same place, they start to crumble, right? So like as soon as that daily stand-up at 2 p.m. that you always had is no longer possible because half the teammates are no longer 2 p.m., it might be 2 a.m., all of a sudden you have to shift your perspective and start building out processes that support more asynchronous behavior. So yeah, I mean, I think that this idea of like whiteboarding and, doing a real-time video call, a lot of times people have a thing baked into their mind that says like, because it's faster, it's better. And I think that a lot of times it doesn't necessarily incorporate the idea that some people don't think that quickly on the fly. Some people don't feel comfortable speaking up in a meeting that way. Sometimes taking time to whiteboard something on your own and then showing it to someone, letting them riff on that and send it back to you is better than two people trying to do it at the exact same time.
Yeah, that really hits home to me. I can't tell you how often I make the statement, let me think about this offline and come back to you, because I need some time to like fully form, the idea or how I think about something. And so I think the value of asynchronous is useful there. And then you also mentioned something about like kind of leveling everyone's voice. I've been the person in the room where, I probably talk more than I should. And then I've also been the person in the room where, it's hard to be heard. And it's, and that's a byproduct of people with, dominant personalities, which isn't a bad thing, but whenever you're trying to make sure all voices are heard on an equal playing field, that it can sometimes be challenging. So that really resonates. So it feels like you're on the front edge of, a new way of communication or newish. I mean, you're seeing, I'm sure, some incredible adoption right now. What are you learning from, as you've seen people, adopt YAC and use it within companies? Like, what surprised you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the coolest things that we've seen, and I think at the same time that you said this is a new way of communicating, for us, it actually really started with internally we use Snapchat a lot to communicate, because there's a very fast way for me to like draw on my screen or take a photo of something or just like give somebody a quick update that didn't necessarily need to live permanently somewhere. It was just, hey, here's what I'm working on today. And so we were doing it over Snapchat, but that's obviously not where business is supposed to live. And so we tried to replicate that in a B2B tool. So as much as YAC is kind of Slack for voice, it's really Snapchat for business. And that's how we've used it internally for years. And one of the weird byproducts of speaking to yourself in an asynchronous manner, because Snapchat is asynchronous, right? At its core, it's just more on the consumer side, is that you have what we call in kind of development, the rubber duck debugging. I don't know if you've ever heard of this phrase, but it's this idea that if you ever get stuck on something and you just can't solve that bug, you could talk to a rubber duck and the rubber duck will solve it for you. And what this really is just that you're saying something out loud for the first time. The duck is not solving anything for you, but it's forcing you to kind of vocalize the issue out loud, hear it from almost a third-party perspective, and then go, okay, now I hear it as if someone asked me the question and I'm able to solve it. And what's interesting about YAC is that because it's that one-sided way at the very beginning, a lot of times someone will just start a message. They'll send me something and it'll be like, hey, I'm really struggling with this design. I don't know how we should implement this. Let me show you what I've got so far. And then halfway through, they're like, never mind, totally just solved it. Really just needed to talk it out. And that's like one of the interesting things that we've seen come out of this is even though you're speaking to someone else, because it's in that moment, one-sided, you end up actually doing a lot better problem solving for yourself. I literally just did it this morning. I was telling one of our developers that we were missing a feature and I couldn't believe that we messed up on this. And as I'm like halfway through the message, I just canceled it. And I was like, nope, never mind. It's that way by design. Because as I started to talk about it, I realized exactly why we had built it that way. And I didn't even need to send the message. And it's those kind of moments that like you only get when you have time to yourself and you're not pressured to kind of perform on a Zoom call or a Hangout or whatever it may be. So, a lot of the interesting use cases that we've seen have even come from not necessarily even back and forth conversation, but, we just added voice memos, which was just it's an empty user that doesn't go anywhere except for your own account. That you can just like send voice notes into, and it's kind of like therapeutic to talk and remind yourself of things. You can snooze those messages to remind yourself of it later, and that's not even the messaging component. That's really just kind of a one-on-one with yourself, which is really powerful, I think, in an environment in which, you're pressured to constantly communicate to everybody else. And those things might not always be, final answers. But we've seen like big use across like design teams, development teams. The screen sharing functionality on the desktop app lets you show a design in its raw state right out of your Sketch, your Figma, whatever it might be, Adobe XD, and not have to like put it on an InVision or put it into a prototype and then share that out at this very formal review process. It's, hey, here's what I'm looking on. Here's what I'm thinking. One thing I love about getting feedback this way is I hear my designer's thoughts. So I get to hear, here's why I put this icon here. Here's what I'm thinking, this is going to look like. So I get that kind of like prior to a full-blown prototype, and I get to be involved in that process a little bit more. And unlike a lot of other tools on the market, I'm not kind of dipping into their voice channel and bothering them mid-design. I wait for them to have a moment to say, all right, I'm ready to show this to you, and let me get your thoughts on it. And then I have time to collect my feedback and send it back to them. So like reviews and feedback and kind of tossing things back and forth is a super common use case.
How do you think a tool like this changes the type of communication that happens externally? So like between me and my customers or my business partners or et cetera.
I mean, we've definitely found that support is amazing over voice. We have intercom, just like a million other companies have, right? And we'll have a ticket come in and we'll just clearly not be seeing eye to eye. The customer's not understanding, the fix. Maybe we're not understanding the bug, whatever it might be. And then we'll say, hey, you know what? Just like add me on YAC. Here's my URL, yak.com/jmitch. You can just add me on YAC. And then they'll actually vocalize the issue over YAC. And within seconds, we're like, oh, okay, we got it. Never mind. I'll fix that in, 30 seconds, right? And I'll fix it for them really quickly. And it's amazing how you go from this like complicated back and forth because text just has this like level of bandwidth and resolution that like you just can't quite achieve, but voice can. And there's that misunderstanding that's not quite there. And it's taking paragraphs of text to get to, a mutual understanding. And then 1 or 2 voice messages later and boom, you're there. So support, talking to customers. We've seen a lot of use in VCs, either talking to founders who are looking to get investment, or even one of our largest teams is actually, I think, 45 people. And it's just a firm that is talking to all of their CEOs, getting updates, asking how they can be helpful, saying, hey, we're looking at a new round. Would you like to come in? And because it's that kind of like personal high bandwidth communication, it's this really rich way to reach someone one-on-one who's not necessarily in your immediate team, but they're connected to you in a professional manner. And it's really cool to see YAC become this like phone number 3.0. I think, especially here in the States, phone numbers have just gotten a bad rap for being this place for spam and robocalls, and it's almost an annoyance in your life. And having a way to communicate over voice that isn't this thing that takes time out of your day. You can't hang up the call because you're trying to go somewhere or leave the house or whatever. I have this problem all the time because I don't have signal out from my neighborhood. So if I want to do a call, I have to keep it in the house and not leave, or I have to drive a couple miles out of my neighborhood to start the call so I can do it in the car. And with YAC, I can have that same level of communication that a phone call would give me. But I don't have to worry about where I'm at or what I'm doing. I can just do it whenever I need to.
I want to comment on the customer support angle. I'll share an anecdote that you may not be familiar with, but when I first signed up for YAC, I had some like very small billing issue, and I don't issue is not the right word. Billing question is a better word. And as it was getting worked out, one of the people on your team was communicating with me via YAC, like, hey, just want to let you know we're on this. And just hearing someone's voice, say like, hey, this is important to us. We haven't solved it, but we're working on it. Just totally placated, the situation. So wanted to share that anecdote just to, verify, that this idea. One of the other things you talked about was like the inconvenience of phone. It's so funny because we've entered a paradigm right now where like, if a call's not scheduled, like it seems odd that it's happening. When I was younger, it was normal to call a friend without, obviously without, like, we're not like I'm using GCal as a 12-year-old. But now, like, if I get a phone call, like it's like I'm almost like put off, like
or concerned as to why you're getting that phone call.
Yeah, it's like excuse me, you didn't schedule that. and I think rather than like it seems like in this world where we've all been reconditioned to kind of look at our phone that way, something like this would be very useful. For instance, like, one of the tough things I have to do as a venture capitalist is turn down investments. And I don't like doing it via writing. But when I reach out to a founder and say, hey, can we schedule a quick call? Like, that feels like an aspirational moment. And, for them, maybe, right? I don't know and it's not comfortable when it's like, hey, I know you think some good news is coming, but, bad. So I'll end up calling them ad hoc, and then it's like, why is this weird number from, that I don't recognize calling me? And it's just messy. So like products like YAC really get me excited about what the future of communication can look like. So you mentioned you're in this unique position where you've been managing your team remotely, or I'm sorry, in a distributed way via YAC. I'm sorry, prior to COVID, YAC is a tool for that. What are some of the biggest challenges of leading a team that is distributed, and how are you overcoming those?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest ones is always just communication. I've had a really large offshore development team for like 10 years now. Like we're over 300 people, and that's from that design
Wow.
agency side. Yeah, so that has been something that I guess has taught me the power of communication, because I think one of the biggest things is language barriers, time zones, just cultural differences with being in India. And the biggest thing that I've always told customers is like, you are never going to have a bad app development lifecycle or whatever we're building for you because the dev is bad. It is always because of communication. And that's typically because someone's not over communicating, someone's not communicating enough. They decided they didn't want to bother someone, so they didn't ask a question. And so a lot of what YAC is to overcome a lot of those standard pitfalls that you have when you're managing a remote team. I'd say probably the most common one is just pure communication. Feeling like they shouldn't communicate because they're bothering someone, not asking a question because it might be embarrassing, not communicating because we don't communicate enough and therefore a relationship isn't there. And that's something that we feel really strongly about at YAC, is building tools that build relationships, and hearing someone's voice is such a relationship builder versus, a Slack or an email. And so, yeah, I think, the biggest things that you want to overcome when building a remote team is really, normalizing common, communication. And for us, we want to do that in a way that respects everyone's time, instead of, I think, what a lot of other startups are doing right now, which is trying to replicate an office environment by doing a bunch of like virtual, channels or water coolers or whatever that might be. And we think those are great for having fun and, getting to know each other. But throughout the day, what it does is just inconvenience people and distract them from work. So like a big part of what we're doing is starting to respect people's time. And a lot of that has to do with understanding what time it is in their time zone and saying, get off, stop working, enjoy dinner, and stop talking to me. And starting to normalize that behavior of understanding that everyone has an individual kind of 9 to 5 that we need to respect, and that communication shouldn't trump that, right? We should never be bothering someone at odd hours just so that we can get an answer out of them. And so a lot of what we've done, as a company over the years is ensure that everyone feels comfortable chatting with one another, asking each other questions. There's not barriers of managerial, roles in a company that you have to get through. You have a question, you need to ask it, do it. And with something like YAC, you can do it in a way that doesn't take up somebody else's time.
I think that's awesome. Do you worry about burnout with your team? And do you try to take actions to, other than just communicate like, hey, get offline, but just to make sure people aren't burning out and finding that balance?
Yeah, definitely. A big part of what we've always done is support side projects from everybody. And so we're always encouraging people to like do fun stuff on the side that's not directly related to the company, level up your skills. We always pay for education. So if anybody wants to take like a online course or take some lesson in something, we always reimburse them for that. And a lot of what we're doing is, allowing them to be very optional in the events that we do as well. Like we did a whole Among Us like game night, I think last Friday or the Friday before. It was totally optional. It's like, hey, we're gonna hang out. You do not have to show up if you just want to have your Friday night to yourself. But if you do want to like get to know a couple of us, outside of a work environment, feel free to be there. Here's our Discord, right? And so, a big part of that I think people lack sometimes is making those events relaxing and not like networking events. And so, we're trying to make that a very inclusive process where you can come hang out, you can chat, you can play, you can not play, or you can take your Friday off and ignore all of us. I think one of the largest fallacies that I see with remote teams or teams in general is this idea of like, your company is your family and you should treat everybody like your family. And it's like, no, it's work, and it's okay to like put it down at 5 p.m. and come back at 9 a.m. the next day and enjoy your personal time. So that is actually, oddly enough, more inclusive than trying to constantly involve them in company processes.
Are there any hacks you have during that hangout time where you try to get people to loosen up and have their let their guard down?
I think enjoying silence is oddly a weird hack. I think a lot of times people try and make these online Zoom sessions very like scheduled. Let's play a game. It's going to run from this to this. It's going to be exactly like this. And I think sometimes, especially with like a Discord hangout, just chatting as needed, playing a game, relaxing, and having fun is a big part of that. And I think sometimes the HR departments can get in the way and try and make it too much of an event and less of just something fun that you do on a Friday night. So yeah, I mean, one of our hacks is really just the laid back nature of it and not trying to make it a forced HR event that everyone has to show up to and, attend. It should be something that you enjoy just sitting and chatting occasionally. And if you want to hop off, that's fine. If you want to hop in later, that's fine too.
It's funny. I love hearing Discord used in this context, and you're the second person I've spoken with today who's talked about how they're using Discord strategically for them. Do you feel like it raises a question around like what's a wish list, technology, or is there some way that you're hacking a current piece of software technology that leads you to believe that there should be someone focused on doing it the way that you're hacking it to?
I've got a good answer for this, and we're not doing it, but I want to be doing it. So as soon as I get off this call, I'm going to run to my front door and hopefully pick up an Oculus Quest 2.
Okay.
I definitely think that idea of a metaverse and hanging out physically, inside of some kind of VR world is really going to be where these fun Discord hangouts that we have is going to be. So like games like Rec Room that are like bridging that gap between like physical and digital. I'm really hoping for like the next 5 years, there to be a very large renaissance of like, you want to hang out physically, but you can't get out of the house, throw on a headset, everybody can see each other, they can wave at each other, they can talk to each other, and it feels
like Ready Player One.
Yeah, exactly. Rec Room's really cool. You can go like dungeon crawling, you can play paintball, you can play capture the flag. There's like all these activities you can do, and it may look silly and you may have this like funny looking avatar that doesn't represent you in real life, but I'm hoping to see that technology get to a point where we can all start to hang out in a virtual space and we can see each other, feel that presence. And I feel like that is going to be like a great way to connect versus trying to, I think, force it into a work environment and create presence where there didn't really need to be presence. So, I think that's something that I'm super excited about, is this idea of like strapping in a headset and like virtually teleporting to my friend's room and hanging out with him and playing some games, just like we used to do.
I love that. Well, I can't wait to a world until we get to hang out in one that is virtual. So last question. We are going to move past COVID. This is a temporary, blip in the radar of, in the timeline of mankind. We've all made changes. What's a change that you hope persists once the world normalizes?
I mean, I think we've already seen it, right? So like Microsoft just made an announcement, Dropbox just made an announcement of, working from home permanently. I think that is the only thing that matters, is that we normalize remote work, not necessarily any of the apps or the tools or the processes that come out of this, because I think all of that stuff's going to change and it's going to be malleable and it needs to be. But I think the concept and the acceptance of you do not have to be in an office to be successful. I'm glad that a major event happened that like pushed that narrative, to a point where like there was no escaping it. And I think that's the one thing that will come out of this, is just a general acceptance of office does not equal productivity, right? And, butts in seat mentality, like we like to call it at YAC, is like this idea that like you have to be sitting behind a desk to be productive. We like working in random chunks, 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there, 2 hours of uninterrupted, and then take a break and chill out and take a walk. And that's something that a remote work environment, enables. And I'm excited to see the big guys like Microsoft and Dropbox say, hey, we're just going to allow you to work from home now.
That's so important. There's something to be said for the quality of work, not the appearance of work. It's like, what are the outputs, not the inputs? Outputs matter more. I love it. Well, Justin, thank you so much for your time. This has been interesting for me. If anyone wants to reach you or use YAC, where should they go?
Yeah, yak.com/jmitch. You can instantly connect to me there. I'm jmitch on Twitter as well. That's the best way to contact us. You can use it for free, or you can upgrade and use it with your team. So it's definitely available today, and we'd love to talk to you.
Amazing. Awesome. All right, we'll see you later. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much, man.